Hi, I'm Gary, Biker's PhD. We're going to talk a little bit more about camshafts today. Now, I wrote a bunch of cams here on the board. I didn't put down the brand of the cam or anything like that because I'm not trying to sell you a cam. I want to give you enough information that you can make an intelligent decision when you're going to buy a cam. You know, we talked about in other videos that the very first thing you need to know is what you're going to do with your cylinder heads. Whether you're going to port them, whether you're just going to leave them stock, then that's going to help decide what kind of camshaft you're going to want to buy. Once you figure out what you're going to do with your heads, then you have to pick a camshaft. So are we going to pick a bolt-in camshaft, or are we going to pick more of a performance cam because we decided that we want to port the heads, okay? And once you really got to know this, because you pick a performance cam, you don't want to run it with your stock heads, okay? So I want to give you, so everything bases off the cam on what you're going to do with the rest of the motor, okay? So here's some camshafts. You know, a lot of people like to pick cams on the lift. So I've got anywhere from 508 to 660 lift cam. Which one would be the biggest cam? Most people would say, oh man, that's a really big cam, the 660 lift cam, but that's not the biggest cam on the lift. Because see, what you want to do is you want to pick a camshaft off of duration. The duration is the amount of time the valve is open, and that's going to determine whether you have a torque cam, mid-range cam, or a top-end cam. So your duration, that's how long the valve is open. So that's what you want to pick off. The lift is just a byproduct of how the cam was ground, okay? Some of that we talked about in one of my other videos, the symmetrical and non-symmetrical and all that stuff. So the more lift you have, say you got the same duration cam, but you got more lift, it's a better ground cam in my opinion, because it's not necessarily a symmetrical lobe cam. It's a non-symmetrical lobe cam or an inverse non-symmetrical lobe cam, okay? So those are some of the key elements when you're looking at a cam and you decide, okay, this is where I want my power band to be, okay? Let's see if I can find a cam with the most lift, okay? And then you want to decide though, if it's in a bolt-in cam, you got to kind of be careful too, because you got stock springs. You're not pulling the heads off. You're not changing your push rods. You're not doing any of that stuff with a bolt-in cam. So you don't want a really radical lift, high duration bolt-in cam, because your springs just aren't going to take it. Okay, it'll wear out sooner. Although the manufacturer says it will work and guys are getting away with it, it'll work for a while, okay? So let's look at some of these bolt-in cams and some of the differences we've got here. Now, one of the other aspects that you want to look at too when you're deciding on a camshaft is you have opening and closing, and we're not going to get really in detail in this, but I will tell you this, that the closing of the intake valve kind of determines, what that determines is, it's after bottom dead center, that number is, okay, like 50 degrees after bottom dead center. So you've only got so much time before the piston reaches top dead center. That's all the time it has before. It's when the valve closes. The rest of the way up is what it has to build compression before the spark goes off, okay? So that's what that number is. So let's look at the differences now in duration. We've got a duration 226 and 252. That's a big gap in duration. And what they've done is they've looked at that same chart. They flowed the heads just like I did in one of the previous videos. They know what the numbers of a stock head is and how much it flows, and they're trying to trick engines and air pump. Let's trick it into being a better air pump. You ever tried siphoning gas out of using a hose and siphon water out of a pool or out of gas or whatever, okay? And that's what they're kind of trying to do with this huge exhaust duration, you know, the 252 exhaust duration. And what happens with that is when you do that is you have a camshaft, it'll sound mean. It'll sound like a top fuel dragster in the tailpipe, but it has a very, very narrow window. You know, depending upon where the intake valve is closing and how much duration it has, depends on where it turns on, whether it's going to turn on sooner or turn on later. This is going to turn on pretty soon. 51, it's going to probably turn on, you know, $2,000 and peter out about 3,500. So anyway, you have another cam here, 226, 236, much closer in duration. It doesn't have quite as much lift, so it's probably more of a non-symmetrical lobe than what this one would be. If we look at, you know, what this one, because this is 255 or 585 and 585. Okay, if they're the same, I just wrote it down one time. So, but it's 51 degrees, so it's closing just a little bit later. So it's going to turn on just a little bit later. It's probably going to be even a lazier cam than what this one was. Okay. So now we got another cam here, 236, 240, another nice in comparison, really low lift, really a lazy. This is definitely a symmetrical lobe cam, okay? 52, so they're trying to compensate, give it a little more mid-range power, but it's really a lazy dud, in my opinion. Be a really dud cam. I wouldn't purchase it for my bike. Here's the last one here. It's closing at 41. So this one's going to build the most compression. If you're taking a stock motor, the intake valve's closing sooner than any of these other ones. So it's going to build more compression. You know, a stock engine, if you do the math, they're not, I've never had one, when I check deck heights and all that and CC the combustion chambers, I've never had one come out with what the specs say. That's a perfect engine. They're all usually 9 or less, okay? So this one's going to build more cylinder pressure, and that's what you want to build, is cylinder pressure. You don't care about compression ratios, you want to build cylinder pressure. Okay, so this is 41. This is going to build more cylinder pressure. It's got 236, 238, close on that, so it's going to have a better power. We're not trying to trick the engine into thinking it's better air power. We're just going to utilize what we can, and 255 duration. It's not as much as this one, but this is a better all-around, in my opinion. That 555 is a nice safe lift for your valve springs. They're going to hang in there. It's probably a non-symmetrical lobe cam, so it's going to pop the valve open much quicker, and it's going to have a broader power band. So if you're looking for a Bolton cam, these are some of the things you want to look at. Now we got these, what we call performance cams. These cams, for the most part, all these, you're going to want to port your head. There is one here that actually the biggest cam here is this 248, 252. This one may be considered bigger, but it's got less duration on the intake side, so I'd actually classify it as being a little bit smaller, but it's 276, 243, and 276, so that's a really big cam too. But this one here is probably the biggest cam, even though we got a 660 lift. This one here, and it's only 510 lift, it's probably the biggest cam, 248 and 252. And I say that too because it's 254, or it's 54 degrees after bottom dead center before the valve closes. So you really have no compression. You really need to run. You did nothing with the heads, but you really need to run about a 10.5 to 1 piston with this one for it to make any kind of cylinder pressure. And then they basically, with this 248 and 252, they want to trick your engine into thinking it's a better. So you can build a better, a more efficient air pump many different ways. You can do it properly, or you can trick it into thinking it. So this one here, it's also going to sound like a top fuel dragster in the tailpipe. If you really want to sound mean, but you don't care about going anywhere, you just want to drive it around, put, and listen to the pipes, this is a great cam. That's 510 right here. 248, 252, 510. Their power band's pretty narrow, is the thing I don't like about that cam. Okay, then you have another cam here, 43. So it's not going to need as much compression. You could probably get away with a stock piston in this one, even though it's 248, 276. Okay, 635. So you're definitely going to need valve springs. Your stock springs aren't going to work with this. So, but they're thinking you're not going to port the heads or do much with the heads either here. And they're tricking the engine into thinking it's a better air pump. So you get a narrow power band. This one's probably going to turn on much sooner than this one. It will turn on because the valve's closing, has more time to build compression, and it has less duration. The valve isn't open as long. But it is a non-symmetrical lobe, so it is going to open the valve faster. So it's characteristics there. Okay, our next cam, 244, 246, 625. This is an awesome cam if you port your heads. It closes 245. So, you know, you can get away with a 10 to 1 compression piston, you know, building about 185, 190 compression ratio. And the durations are pretty close to the same at 625. So this is a better designed grind cam. Watch the video on you know, my older video on the differences in the cam designs. Then you have another cam here, the 660 lift cam. 246, it's a little bit bigger cam. Even though the duration is not a whole lot more, it's a little bit bigger cam. You're going to need a little more compression to get it up there, but that's a really great performance cam. It's not even really that big a cam. I mean, 246 here, this one's 248, so the valve's open much longer, even though the valve is only open 510. The valve is open much longer on this one than it would be on this big 660 lift. And then another cam here, 242. This one's really going to build the most. You're going to need the least amount of modifications with the piston. You can run, you know, flat top 9.5 to 1 pistons with this particular cam, in my opinion, because it's closing at 42. But it does have quite a bit of duration. So you might want to run a little bit more. 575 lift. That's another. They're good. You know, there's some really good cams on the market for porting your heads and stuff like that. So I just want to give you some of this information. Hopefully this didn't confuse you. You know, you want some really serious details on your camshafts, call the manufacturers. A lot of good manufacturers out there. They're willing to, you know, sit down and talk to you and say, hey, here's the comparisons with the cams. I just want to try and give you enough information that you can look at these cams now and say, okay, I want to narrow it down to these. And once you get your cam decided, then we can look at and port your heads to match the cam. your cylinder pressure. There's a mathematical formula that you use. We're using the valve closings, opening and closings, and the duration and the lift. And then you figure out the cylinder pressure. And we're going to get into some of that other stuff later on. So hit the subscribe button. We're going to talk some more about cams. We're going to talk about lifters and push rods and some of the different things that go along with that, because it's not about one piece that's going to make your engine great. It's about matching all of them. And then that bike just runs out, when you hit the throttle, it's like, man, if the rev limiter wouldn't hit it, just run all the way out the back door. And it makes it fun, whether you're putting a bolt-in cam, you're putting a mid-size cam in, or a big cam. We want to make your bike where it's really fun to ride. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Like I said, hit the subscribe button. God bless you, and hope you have a great day.